do likewise, but because I'm a woman. Because I'm a woman, you're going to take this away from me? That is not right. There's a lot of men out here that have said a lot of things, and because they're men, that doesn't happen to them.
The Serena Williams breakdown. The horrible result of sexism.
Mr. Reagan.
So, I'm a tennis fan. I've watched a lot of tennis over the years. I'm not crazy about sports in general, but I do like to watch tennis. I think one of the primary reasons is because it's one of the few sports in which it's one player alone against another player alone. These players receive all of the glory alone, and they fail alone. With team sports, there's a variety of other factors that people love, but I find the pure victory or loss of the individual in a tennis match more exciting. Serena Williams has been a phenomenon. Serena dominated the sport for years, and even though she's an American, I usually wanted Serena to lose throughout the years. This is primarily because she was so dominant. Because of her dominance, the sport tended to be a bit boring. You kind of always knew who was going to win. But also, Serena always had a pretty bad attitude. I just never really liked her. She can be polite, she can be gracious in victory, she can be gracious in defeat, but too often have I seen Serena Williams affect an attitude that seemed entitled to me, arrogant, cocky. She struts around the court like she owns it, and this incident is not the first time she had problems with tennis officials. And she's not always going after male referees, she also goes after the ladies, too.
And Serena Williams is giving it to her.
Point penalty, game, set, match.
She has said something to that linesman, and she's gone.
This most recent incident was particularly ugly, however, because Serena Williams pulled out the feminist card.
But you know how many other men do things that are, I don't think they do much worse than that. This is not fair. There's a lot of men out here that have said a lot of things, and because they're men, that doesn't happen to them. There are men out here that do likewise, but because I'm a woman. Because I'm a woman, you're going to take this away from me? That is not right.
After Serena Williams was called out for several violations of the rules, she went batshit crazy.
I didn't get coaching. You need to make an announcement that I didn't get coaching. I don't cheat. I didn't get coaching. How can you say that? You owe me an apology. You owe me an apology. I have never cheated in my life. I have a daughter and I stand what's right for her, and I've never cheated. And you owe me an apology. For you to attack my character is something that's wrong. It's wrong. You attacking my character. Yes, you are. You owe me an apology. You will never, ever, ever be on another court of mine as long as you live. You are the liar. When are you going to give me my apology? You owe me an apology. Say it. Say you're sorry. Well, then don't talk to me. Don't talk to me. How dare you insinuate that I was cheating?
Yeah.
You're a thief, too.
Now, she wasn't just pulling a John McEnroe temper tantrum here. She was full-on crying. It was awkward, it was ugly, and it was really weird.
For calling you a thief.
And that's not right. This is not fair.
Now, when somebody is playing a sport at this level, I imagine they're under a lot of stress. But Serena Williams is a professional. She's been doing this for years and years and years. Yes, she works very hard to win the tournaments. Of course, she wants her hard work to pay off. Of course, she's going to be frustrated if at the very end, when it really matters the most, she loses it all. That's the most heartbreaking moment to lose. But this umpire was not making her lose. She was just losing. The other girl was just beating her. After the incident, after Serena Williams had thrown out her accusations of sexism, a lot of people chimed in, a lot of her friends in the tennis community, and a lot of leftist reporters. They all seemed to say similar things. What happened to Serena was unfair. Yes, there's some kind of sexism going on in tennis. This is all baloney. It's possible that this umpire, this guy, was treating Serena Williams unfairly. This sort of thing happens in sports. When I was growing up, the only professional sports team that I followed was the Portland Trail Blazers. This was the only professional team that we have in Oregon. Year after year, the Trail Blazers would get into the playoffs. They would often get into the finals, but they never won the championship. Watching many of the games, my father and I would become infuriated with the refs. There was a theory at the time that referees in basketball tended to be partial to the teams with larger fan bases. The theory was that the more popular the team was that won the championship, the more merchandise the NBA could sell at the end of every season. It made a lot of sense. It was probably true. It's probably still true to this day. Sure, my dad complained about the bad refs a lot when I was a kid, but at the end of the day, what could you do? So my dad said something that stuck with me. He said, you can't just beat the other team. You've also got to beat the refs. And I think that this is actually applicable to life. In life, there's going to be a lot of things that come against you, right? In any profession, in your personal life, in all kinds of circumstances. Life is not just if you're good enough, you'll succeed. Life is if you're good enough and you can beat all the crap coming up against you, then you can succeed, right? Serena Williams is not the only person in this world who's had something bad happen to them. In fact, probably, for most of her life, she's had exclusively good things happen to her. Serena Williams has been the darling of the tennis community for 2 decades, I think. The truth is, most of the questionable calls have probably gone to her over the years. She's probably had a slight advantage. She's the team with all the fans. She's been spoiled. So when she gets a rare call against her, she doesn't get it. She's not used to it. She thinks the refs should all be on her side all the time. And they usually are. I've heard her complain time after time about petty little things that she should really just push past. But she always thinks that every questionable call should go to her. She thinks that the world of tennis revolves around Serena. Well, maybe not anymore. What Serena Williams seems to have failed to consider is that she's not the only one that's dedicated her life to the sport she's competing at. The girl on the other side of the net has put in just as many hours of work as she has, but the girl on the other side of the net may not have had all the lucky breaks, starting with not having Serena Williams' DNA. The sad truth is, for most athletes, is that they're never going to be the best. Serena Williams got to be the best for decades, and she's getting a little older now, at least for a tennis player. And she's not going to win every single game anymore. She's still a phenomenal player, clearly, and I guess it's going to be kind of hard for her to transition from being the absolute best, probably of all time, to somebody who's just really, really good. And that's a common tragedy that athletes have to face at some point in their life. But she had a legitimate breakdown on the court, and then she blamed sexism. Why does this matter? Why do I even make a video about this stupid crap? The reason why it matters is that people believe this garbage. The reason that it matters is that people believe this garbage. This is the kind of little nonsense that, combined with a bunch of other little nonsense things, influences society. And tons of people go along with it because they all want to be on the side of Serena Williams, or they don't want to be considered sexist. So they just nod their heads and say, oh, yeah, I see it. It's the emperor's new clothes situation. Well, if you don't agree with Serena Williams, well, then you're just a sexist. I wish there was some little boy who would slap truth back into the rest of the population. He could walk onto the court, point at the emperor, Serena Williams, and shout, "That's not sexist, you just lost the game." Now, I could get into details about the umpire's calls, but they're pretty irrelevant. I will say this. Oftentimes, these umpires in tennis have a difficult job. It's difficult for them to judge games fairly because a lot of times these calls are a real coin toss. A lot of times they don't really know what the right call is. So in these cases, I've heard it explained like this to me. These umpires just make a call. They just call something randomly in favor of one player or another. In instances like these, oftentimes the umpire, wanting to keep the game fair, will make another call in favor of the other player sometime during the match to balance out the call they made earlier. This is an imperfect way of running a professional level sport in which hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars are on the line. But that's how professional sports go. So long as you have humans judging them, you'll have human error. As long as you have human error, you're going to need some kind of system to balance that out. It's not perfect, but it is what it is. Now, I don't know if this guy was being unfair to Serena Williams, or if he was employing some kind of a strategy to appropriately balance the match, or if he genuinely thought Serena Williams was doing something inappropriate. I mean, I can't honestly tell you what the guy was thinking. What I can tell you is that Serena Williams was breaking the rules. After the match, her coach was interviewed. He was asked whether or not he was coaching her, which is the rule violation that Serena Williams was called for. Serena Williams' coach freely admitted that he was coaching her. He said, "Of course I was. Everybody does it. Nobody ever gets called for it."
Can you describe the motion that you made that was interpreted by the chair umpire as coaching?
Well, I mean, I'm honest. I was coaching, but I was like 100% of the coaches on 100% of the matches. So we have to stop this hypocrite thing. Sasha was coaching every point too.
Okay, so maybe the other coaches are subtler. Maybe the umpires call it when they see it, but they don't see it that often. Or maybe the umpire had a reason why he thought it needed to be called that time. Whatever the case, Serena Williams reacted in a way that was absurd. The first thing that I think was weird is that Serena Williams did not recognize the fact that she was being coached. She went into berserker mode. She took the most physically aggressive posture I could possibly imagine her taking and went around berating the umpire as if he'd said something that was completely false. It's actually a real testament to Serena Williams' acting ability.
I have never cheated in my life. I have a daughter and I stand what's right for her and I've never cheated. And you owe me an apology.
She really looks like she genuinely believed that she was not being coached. She's screaming the words, "I don't need to cheat to win. I don't need to cheat to win."
I don't cheat to win. I'd rather lose.
Well, actually you do. Clearly you were breaking the rules, and even if everybody else is breaking the rules, it doesn't mean that's okay. And even if you think it's okay, to scream that you were not cheating when you clearly were is the wrong way to fight that battle. So maybe she felt she was being treated unfairly, but she's not complaining about the right thing. But she is complaining ferociously. Her frustrations eventually get the best of her, and she breaks a racket.
Backhand error and took it out of the frame. It's a code violation.
Code violation, racket abuse.
Okay, we've seen this happen many times in tennis. It's not that unusual. What is unusual is that she would not drop the issue with the coaching. She just kept going after this umpire until he'd had enough, and he penalized her again for consistently going after him.
Yeah, Serena was watching her coach give her a hand
Code
signal.
violation, verbal abuse,
And now,
penalty, Mrs. Williams.
Wow.
Now, I don't blame this guy. I don't see why he's got to deal with her verbal abuse for the rest of the match simply because he made a call that was legitimate. Even if there was some kind of unspoken rule that these coaching violations are never called, he felt that it needed to be called, and we don't really know what was in his head with regards to that. That's his business. Serena Williams reacting like a banshee does not help the situation. Just accept the call and continue playing. Now, our modern society doesn't like us to stereotype people by immutable characteristics. Like, they don't like us to say men tend to be like this and women tend to be like that. But I'm totally going to do this right now. Women tend to complain about stuff that isn't the stuff they're really upset about. I figured this out when I was in college. I had this girlfriend who went ballistic one day because I made her tea wrong. I spent a good hour arguing with her about this really stupid thing. After we parted, I had a little bit of time alone, and I got to thinking about our fight. It occurred to me that maybe my girlfriend wasn't mad at me about the tea. Maybe she was mad at me about something bigger. She didn't want to bring it up for some reason. And so she took out her frustrations on me about this insignificant little thing. We both knew that when we left university, I was going to break up with her. She wanted to stay with me. Of course, that's what her problem was. She couldn't have cared less about the tea, not really. It was the fact that I was going to leave her. That's why she was really upset. But she didn't want to bring that up, so she just yelled at me about the tea. And over the years, after several girlfriends, I discovered that this was a pattern. This wasn't just my girlfriend in college. This was pretty much every woman. Serena Williams, I think, is no different. She's getting mad because she's losing, but there really is no one to blame for that except herself and the other player. And what's she going to do? Say, stop playing so good? So she's got to vent her frustrations in some other way, so her target becomes this umpire. So I think this whole embarrassing incident boils down to her being frustrated that she was losing. And none of this would matter at all, except she tried to save face by turning it from something completely petty and self-centered to this grand, noble goal of combating sexism. Her accusation specifically was that men get away with far worse stuff. I think what she was talking about in particular was the idea that men can get away with berating an umpire much more severely without getting a penalty. Well, I think sometimes they can, and sometimes they get penalized very quickly. I think sometimes an umpire just takes it and deals with it. It's also possible that women, being typically less aggressive, don't often berate the umpires in this way. So this umpire might have felt particularly disrespected by Serena in the context of a women's tennis match. I don't see any problem with that. Human beings deal with things contextually all the time. If you're starving to death and somebody gives you a packet of saltine crackers, you're not going to complain. You're going to be incredibly grateful. But if you go to a 5-star restaurant, you pay $100 for your meal, and the chef brings you a bag of saltine crackers, you're going to get pretty pissed off. Context matters. And even if there were two standards, one for the behavior of men and one for the behavior of women, Serena Williams isn't playing a man. She's playing a woman. Double standards are irrelevant if the men and women aren't competing against each other. Serena Williams is complaining about an irrelevant point. And it's a point that I don't even think is really true. But even if it is true, it doesn't affect her in any way whatsoever. She knows the rules of the game. There's no coaching allowed during the match. You can't break a racket on the court. You can't berate the umpire. You're playing a game that exists within these parameters. Your opponent is playing a game that exists within these parameters. You both know the rules. You're both playing having agreed to those rules. So don't start bitching and moaning when you don't follow the rules and you're called out for it. The whole incident was a temper tantrum masquerading as social activism. Honestly, I don't even think the feminist thing was being used with some sophisticated intent to make herself look better after the whole thing blew over. I actually think that this was just another tactic to get her penalties waived. I think everything about this was as selfish and ego-driven as one might possibly imagine. Sure, sometimes you do see a man throwing fits and getting mad about calls, but for the most part, most of the guys that I see playing the game have a great deal of integrity. The best players, Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, Djokovic, these guys are all great guys. I've never seen them really do anything terribly undignified. You don't often see them yelling at the refs, and in general, they accept the rules of the game and act accordingly. Serena Williams apparently thinks she's above all that. She thinks she's owed something by everyone in the tennis community. She isn't. She's been paid, and she's been paid very, very well. At the end of the day, most people are watching men's tennis to see the highest level of athleticism possible in the game. They're watching women's tennis to see hot girls in short skirts. Serena Williams is messing that whole thing up. The sooner she retires, the better it'll be for the game. Well, that's it for me. If you like these kind of hard truths, which society does not like to talk about, consider giving me some money through my Patreon account. The link is available below in the description. With this money, I can make more videos and try to disseminate sensible ideas to the public. If you like this video, please give it a like. If you want to see more like this, please subscribe. And if you hate me, you are surely a feminist. And if that's the case, let me just say, this is what an anti-feminist looks like. Good night.
President Washington began this tradition in 1790 after reminding the nation that the destiny of self-government is finally staked on the experiment entrusted to the hands of the American people. For our friends in the press who place a high premium on accuracy, let me say, I did not actually hear George Washington say that.